Greetings, library science students. My name is Rebecca Lubas, and I am the Dean of the Central Washington University Libraries, and I'm really happy to be talking to you today about a little bit about crisis and disaster management planning in libraries, with a focus on academic libraries, but public and school libraries certainly would be concerned with this too. And my title here kind of says it all. We didn't sign up for this. I think when all of us joined the library science profession, we maybe did think about some types of crises and disasters, but we probably didn't quite envision, I certainly didn't, the current crisis. So we're going to talk a little bit about what you face in these kind of incidents. So first of all, there's an old saying that fortune favors the prepared mind. Some disasters, you can kind of have an idea about what might be coming a little better than others. I personally, I've lived in Louisiana and I've lived in California, so I've done a lot of thinking about hurricanes and floods and earthquakes. So you can at least mitigate some of the effects of a crisis by planning for what your areas may be prone to, and asking yourself questions about, well, if a flood strikes or if a earthquake strikes, what are the safety issues in the building? What are the disaster mitigation plans? So there's kind of several waves of a crisis. There's first making sure everyone is safe, but then after that, how do you assess damage on the building and how do you prepare for that? And then I know a lot of my colleagues in California have experienced not being able to get back in their building for a very long time after an earthquake because the building wasn't safe to re-enter. So you do still have to set up alternative services even in that scenario. But then there's the risks that are hard to predict, like our current crisis. So I thought I would talk to you a little bit about what it's been like to be a library manager in the time of COVID-19. Um, the biggest first decision that faced us was the decision to close. And that was something that libraries and communities all over the United States and all over the world had to face. And it wasn't a general big decision. It was really at first very local decisions. Eventually, the American Library Association did recommend libraries close, but it still had very much to do with what was going on in your local community, not just because of considerations about, well, how bad is the situation? Has the virus hit the confines of our community yet? But also about what the library is providing. If you work in a public library, you might have been facing issues where the library may have been providing basic services that you were a bit reluctant to turn off. For example, a lot of city libraries were points for meal provision and other basic services where there's an intersection of social services with libraries. So again, kind of taking the cues from your community are very important in a situation like this. Then there's levels of decision about what needs quick action and what you can take a little bit more time to deal with. So once we had made the decision that this was the right time to close, what needs did we immediately need to make after figuring out all the staff was safe? For example, we closed in the middle of finals week, and it was a finals week when all finals were taken online. So we had to make a provision to provide laptops for students. So even though the building was closed, we were still making appointments for students to come and pick up a laptop so they would be able to finish their final papers and their final exams in some cases. Then there were some decisions where we were able to take a little more time to figure out. Fortunately for us, we were given a 2.5-week break before classes started again, and the libraries were able to come up with a plan for virtual services. What's very important when you're dealing with a rapidly evolving situation is, I think a lot of us who go into libraries are very prone to perfectionism, and we want, of course, to do the best we possibly can. but sometimes perfection can be your enemy, um, because students were coming back to school on April 8th, even if it was online, and we needed to have services ready for them on that date. So, for example, at the CWU libraries, we thought very seriously about, well, how do we market our services to students virtually? We already had a virtual chat service, but that was like a complement of our regular walk-in service as opposed to the main service. So, pretty much in the space of 2.5 weeks, we marketed our virtual chat and our virtual reference appointments as these are the heart of our services now. And this was something that we had actually been very interested in doing anyway, because Central Washington University has a robustly growing online students, such as yourself, population. So we really wanted to do this anyway, but under normal circumstances, we would have taken several months to plan. We would have taken months to train before we put folks who hadn't done reference services before on the rotation. But we had 2.5 weeks to do that this time. So some of it was simply, accepting like, yeah, this isn't the way we would normally like to work, but this is how we can best serve our students and our patrons. And another thing to accept is that, our first rollout of something might not be perfect the first time we do it, and that's okay. And it's okay to iterate. I think in web development and computer science, there may be a little more of a sentiment of get a beta out there and then improve it as you go along. And that's definitely the zone that we've been living in now. The other thing I'd like to emphasize is the huge importance of communication in a crisis. And this is something to think about before the crisis. So back to the fortune favoring the prepared mind issue. Um, think about making sure you know how to get in touch with everyone you need to get in touch with from your library, and think about a communication tree, making sure the supervisors all communicate with their supervisees, making sure they're backups, because if there's a crisis, the crisis might affect one of the hubs in your communication system. And if that person is, affected, you might need somebody to back them up because they may be occupied with other things, depending on what type of crisis it is. And then something else that's also a little bit challenging for, I think, any manager, but challenging for library managers. We do very careful planning, and we think about staying the course, and we have missions and directions. But in a crisis, you may often have to pivot. So for example, for a lot of folks in libraries during this crisis, there was the thought that we're going to stay open as long as we can to serve as many people as possible. But with the way the situation developed, eventually that was no longer the right thing to do. So having kind of, I think, the professional grace to say, okay, I did say one thing last week, and now what I'm saying now is a little different. And there's reasons, because we have more data, or or the situation's just so rapidly evolving, that that's okay to do. And to give yourself permission to do that as a manager is very important, because I think, in libraries, we pride ourselves on our steadiness and our reliability, and we want to appear as folks who are reliable and who can be counted on. But sometimes the best decision for your population is for you to change your mind very quickly, and accepting that is very important in this particular kind of crisis. So my last piece of advice that I want to give about crisis management is you should get by with a little help from your friends. You're not in this alone. We're a very collaborative profession. And usually wherever you are, there's going to be strong professional networks to share information. I've never seen information shared so rapidly as I have in the library profession the last couple of weeks in this crisis. Everybody is able to say, here's what I did, here's what I wish I did differently. Here's what you should try, and this is what worked out for me, and hopefully I can prevent you, my friend, from making the same mistake I did. So in our particular region, the Orbis Cascade Library Alliance is a great source of advice. It is all academic libraries. It's a mixture of research institutions and teaching institutions such as CWU and as well as community colleges. But the advice in the page that they have on COVID-19 is great and would apply to any type of library. So I'd really recommend you're looking at it. And if you get the slides, I have it hot linked. But if not, just go ahead and Google Orbis Cascade and COVID-19. And a couple other bodies that I want to recommend to you. Again, they're academic library focused, but they're full of advice that's applicable across library type. Is the Coalition for Networked Information. They have they've completely converted their online spring conference to online sessions, and they're making the videos available free to all the world. And one of the sessions that they have upcoming next week is called Event 2001, What Didn't We See Coming, and Why Didn't We See It Coming? So when that's available, I highly recommend that. And there's also a body called Ithaca SNR, and they do research in libraries, and they're often kind of figuring out the leading edge of what's going on in libraries, and they're a very useful body, and they've been running roundtables of library leaders the last couple of weeks so they can gather and analyze what everyone is doing. So I would love to invite you all, if you have any questions about what it's like to be a library manager in times of the unexpected. There's my email up on the screen, and I would love to chat with you. So please reach out. And in these challenging times, I ask that you be well and stay safe. It was great talking to you.